The morning started like any other. I rolled out of bed, the familiar sounds of my husband Jordan's gentle snoring filling the room. Padding across the cool hardwood floors, I made my way to the bathroom and splashed some water on my face, trying to shake off the lingering grogginess. As I glanced in the mirror, I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. A faint spotting, barely noticeable, but enough to set off alarm bells in my mind. I tried to push the worries aside, telling myself it was probably nothing, but deep down, I knew better. Jordan and I had been trying for a baby for over a year now, and the constant disappointment had started to take its toll. Every month, the same cycle of hope followed by crushing despair. I tried to stay positive, focusing on my job as an elementary school teacher, but the longing for a child of our own was becoming harder and harder to ignore. Over breakfast, I debated whether or not to bring up my concerns to Jordan. He was always so supportive, but I could see the frustration in his eyes whenever the topic of children came up. It was as if he was starting to doubt whether it would ever happen for us. "Everything okay, babe?" Jordan asked, picking up on my distant gaze. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just lost in thought." He reached across the table and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Don't worry, it'll happen for us. We just have to be patient." His words were reassuring, but I couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. What if something was wrong with me? What if I could never give Jordan the family he so desperately wanted? The day passed in a blur, my mind constantly drifting back to the spotting and the nagging fear that something wasn't right. By the time I got home from work, I had made up my mind. I needed to see a doctor, if only for peace of mind. Jordan was supportive, as always, but I could see the concern etched across his face. We sat in the doctor's office, holding hands tightly, bracing ourselves for whatever news was to come. "Mrs. West," the doctor said, her voice somber, "the tests indicate that you're experiencing early ovarian aging. It's a condition that can make it difficult, if not impossible, to conceive naturally." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Impossible to conceive. My world came crashing down around me as I struggled to process the news. Jordan pulled me close, whispering reassurances in my ear, but I could sense a shift in his demeanor, a flicker of doubt, of disappointment that he quickly tried to mask. As we drove home in silence, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of the end for us. Could our love survive this devastating blow, or would the strain of infertility be too much for us to bear? Over the next few months, Jordan and I tried to remain positive, exploring every possible treatment option. He was supportive at first, holding my hand through the grueling rounds of fertility drugs and the invasive procedures that left me emotionally and physically drained. "We'll get through this together," he would say, pulling me close after another disappointing negative test result. But as time went on, I could sense a subtle shift in his demeanor. The reassuring smiles became more forced, the comforting words rang a little hollower. It was as if the constant disappointment was starting to wear him down too. One night, after another failed attempt at conceiving, Jordan let his guard down. "I just don't understand why this is so difficult," he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "My parents had 4 kids without even trying." The words stung, reminding me of my own perceived inadequacy. I tried to brush it off, but the comment lingered in the back of my mind, planting seeds of doubt that would only continue to grow. As the weeks turned into months, the distance between us seemed to widen. Jordan began to bury himself in his work, coming home late and retreating to his home office for hours on end. I tried to be understanding, knowing that he was dealing with his own disappointment in his own way, but the loneliness was becoming unbearable. One night, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I noticed Jordan's phone lighting up with a text notification. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something made me pause. A nagging feeling, a voice in the back of my mind telling me to take a closer look. I shouldn't have done it. I knew it was a violation of his privacy, but the temptation was too strong. I picked up his phone and felt my heart sink as I read the message. "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe. I'll bring the wine." The words seemed to jump off the screen, taunting me with their implications. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the rest of the conversation, each message more damning than the last. Jordan came home a few hours later, his eyes glazed over and his movements unsteady. The smell of perfume lingered on his clothes, a scent that wasn't mine. "Where have you been?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Out with some colleagues from work. We had a few drinks to celebrate a project launch." The lie was so blatant, so transparent, that it only added insult to injury. I wanted to scream, to rage against the betrayal, but the words caught in my throat. "I know about the texts, Jordan," I finally managed to choke out. "I know you're seeing someone else." For a moment he looked stunned, like a deer caught in the headlights. Then his expression hardened, and he let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what you think?" he sneered. "Maybe if you could give me a child, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for satisfaction." The cruelty of his words cut me to the core. In that moment, I saw the true depths of his selfishness, his willingness to place all the blame on me for our struggles. As he stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind him, I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. The man I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone cold and callous, someone capable of the ultimate betrayal. But even in my grief, a spark of determination began to flicker within me. Jordan may have thought he had the upper hand, but he had no idea what I was capable of. The game was just beginning, and I intended to play to win. The revelation of Jordan's infidelity hit me like a ton of bricks, but I refused to let it break me. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself retreating into a shell, isolating myself from friends and family as I grappled with the pain and betrayal. Jordan, for his part, seemed wholly unrepentant. He would come and go as he pleased, spending more and more time away from home, no doubt in the company of his mistress. The few times we did cross paths, the air was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. "Why are you doing this to us?" I finally worked up the courage to ask one evening as he was heading out the door. He paused, his hand on the doorknob, and turned to face me with a cold, emotionless stare. "Maybe if you could give me what I really want, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere." The words cut deep, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt me. Instead, I met his gaze with a steely determination, silently vowing that he would pay for his cruelty. As the weeks dragged on, Jordan became increasingly brazen in his deception. He would come home late, reeking of cheap perfume and alcohol, and stumble off to bed without so much as a word. It was as if he had completely given up on even trying to hide his indiscretions. One night, as I sat alone in our living room, staring blankly at the flickering TV screen, I heard a faint, buzzing noise. It took me a moment to realize it was coming from Jordan's jacket pocket, which he had carelessly tossed over the back of the couch. Part of me knew I shouldn't look, that I was only setting myself up for more heartache. But another, more primal part of me couldn't resist the temptation. With trembling hands, I reached into the pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen was lit up with a string of text messages, each one more damning than the last, explicit photos, suggestive comments, and promises of secret rendezvous that made my stomach churn. As I scrolled through the messages, a sense of rage began to build within me. How dare he? How dare he betray me in such a callous, brazen way? The man I had once loved, the man I had vowed to stand by through thick and thin, was nothing more than a snake in the grass, a selfish, deceitful coward. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to sit idly by and let Jordan continue to humiliate and disrespect me. No, it was time to take matters into my own hands. If he wanted to play games, then I would play too, and I would make sure I came out on top. From that moment on, I became a woman possessed. I started keeping a meticulous log of Jordan's comings and goings, documenting his every lie and indiscretion. I gathered evidence, screenshots of the damning text messages, receipts for expensive gifts and hotel rooms that he had no doubt charged to our joint account. And all the while, I played the part of the oblivious, dutiful wife, lulling Jordan into a false sense of security. He had no idea that the ground was shifting beneath his feet, that his carefully constructed web of lies was about to come crashing down around him. It was a dangerous game I was playing, but I was fueled by a burning desire for justice, for revenge. Jordan had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and he was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Little did he know, the true storm was only just beginning to brew. As the weeks passed, I found myself becoming consumed by my quest for revenge, meticulously gathering evidence of Jordan's misdeeds. But even as I built my case against him, a part of me still clung to the hope that it was all some terrible misunderstanding. That hope was shattered one night at a neighborhood party. Jordan and I had agreed to make an appearance, putting on a united front for the sake of appearances. As we mingled with our friends and neighbors, making small talk and sipping lukewarm beer, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. A petite blonde woman, no older than 25, sauntering across the room with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Our eyes met briefly, and she flashed me a sickly sweet smile that sent a chill down my spine. "Who's that?" I asked Jordan, trying to keep my voice casual. He followed my gaze, and I saw his expression shift ever so slightly. "Oh, that's Kaylee. She's new to the neighborhood." The way he said her name, the slight catch in his breath, told me everything I needed to know. This was the woman he had been seeing, the one he had been sneaking around with behind my back. As the party wore on, I found myself unable to take my eyes off of Kaylee. She moved through the crowd with ease, flirting shamelessly with any man who crossed her path, including Jordan. At one point, I caught them engaged in what appeared to be a heated conversation, their faces inches apart as they whispered back and forth. Kaylee's hand lingered a little too long on Jordan's arm, and I felt a surge of jealousy and anger coursing through my veins. When Jordan finally broke away and made his way back to me, I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. "So, who is she really?" I asked, my voice low and laced with accusation. Jordan's eyes widened, and he quickly tried to compose himself. "She's just a neighbor, babe. I was welcoming her to the community." The lie was so blatant, so insulting, that I felt myself shaking with rage. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Jordan. I saw the way she was touching you, the way you were looking at her." For a moment, he seemed caught off guard, like a deer in the headlights. Then his expression hardened, and he let out a bitter laugh. "You want to know the truth?" he spat. "She's the woman who's going to give me what you can't. A family." The words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I stumbled back, my vision blurring with tears as the weight of his betrayal crashed down upon me. Jordan must have seen the pain in my eyes, because his expression softened ever so slightly. "Look, Lila, I'm sorry, but this isn't working. We both know it. Maybe it's time we face the fact that we want different things." I wanted to scream, to lash out at him for his callousness, his complete disregard for my feelings. But somehow, I found the strength to hold my tongue. "You're right, Jordan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It is time we faced the facts." And with that, I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there, stunned and alone. As I made my way through the crowd, my mind was racing. Jordan had shown his true colors, and there was no going back. The gloves were off, and I was prepared to fight dirty if that's what it took to bring him down. Little did he know, I had been preparing for this moment all along. And when the time came, I would be ready to deliver the ultimate revenge. After the devastating confrontation at the neighborhood party, I knew I had to take action. Jordan had made it crystal clear that he was done with our marriage, that he was ready to move on and start a new life with his young mistress. But I wasn't about to let him off that easily. Not after everything he had put me through. For days, I seethed in silence, biding my time and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Jordan, emboldened by his admission, became even more brazen in his infidelity, spending nights away from home and making little effort to hide his liaisons with Kaylee. It was during one of these extended absences that I finally made my move. Using the wealth of evidence I had gathered over the past weeks, the incriminating text messages, the hotel receipts, even grainy photographs of Jordan and Kaylee in compromising positions, I began to piece together a damning case against him. I knew that if I wanted to truly hit him where it hurt, I needed to expose his betrayal in a way that would humiliate him, strip him of his false sense of superiority, and bring him crashing back down to earth. And so I hatched a plan. Late one night, after Jordan had once again failed to come home, I slipped out of the house and made my way to his office. I knew the security codes, the hidden spare key, all the little tricks he thought he had kept so carefully guarded. With trembling hands, I accessed his computer, rifling through files and folders until I found what I was looking for: his personal email and social media accounts, the digital lifeblood that he so carelessly left unprotected. One by one, I began forwarding the incriminating evidence to his closest friends and colleagues, his family members, even his boss. Explicit photos, damning text conversations, receipts for extravagant gifts and hotel stays, nothing was left out. And then, just for good measure, I took to his social media accounts, broadcasting his infidelity for the whole world to see. To my so-called husband, Jordan West, I wrote, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a newfound sense of empowerment. This is the truth you've been so desperate to hide. I hit send, and just like that, the floodgates were open. Jordan's carefully curated facade came crumbling down, his sordid secrets laid bare for all to witness. As I made my way back home, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I knew that the fallout would be nuclear, that Jordan's world was about to implode in spectacular fashion. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally in control of my own destiny. Jordan came stumbling in just before dawn, his shirt rumpled and his hair disheveled. He reeked of alcohol and cheap perfume, the telltale signs of another night spent in Kaylee's arms. He didn't even look at me as he staggered towards the bedroom, lost in his own drunken haze. It wasn't until later that morning, when his phone began to buzz incessantly with a barrage of calls and text messages, that the reality of what I had done began to sink in. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice thick with panic as he scrolled through the damning evidence that I had so carefully curated. I simply shrugged, a small, satisfied smile playing across my lips. "I believe the truth is finally out, Jordan." His eyes widened in horror as the full weight of my actions hit him. In that moment, I could see the arrogance, the smug sense of superiority draining from his face. "You're going to pay for this," he hissed, his hands balling into fists at his sides. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. "No, Jordan," I said, my voice calm and steady. "It's you who's going to pay." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him to face the consequences of his own actions. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. In the aftermath of my public exposure of Jordan's infidelity, the fallout was swift and brutal. His once thriving career lay in tatters, his reputation irreparably damaged by the sordid details I had so meticulously laid bare. Friends and family members who had once rallied around him now turned their backs, disgusted by his betrayal. Even his own parents, once so proud and doting, could barely bring themselves to look him in the eye. As for me, I found myself riding a wave of vindication, basking in the knowledge that I had finally taken back control of my life, my dignity. Jordan had thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, but I had proven him wrong in spectacular fashion. Still, there was one final piece of the puzzle that needed to be put into place. A few weeks after the explosive revelation, Jordan and I found ourselves seated in the familiar waiting room of our fertility doctor's office. The air between us was thick with tension, a palpable sense of animosity that had only grown more pronounced in the wake of my retaliation. "Mrs. West, the doctor will see you now," the receptionist called out, her voice laced with a hint of pity that made my skin crawl. Jordan rose to his feet, shooting me a venomous glare as he brushed past me and made his way towards the examination room. I followed closely behind, steeling myself for what was to come. Well, what a pleasure to see you both again," the doctor said, her tone dripping with sarcasm as we took our seats. "I must say, your personal lives have certainly been eventful as of late." Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw clenched tightly. "Can we just cut to the chase, Doc? I'm sure you didn't call us here to gossip." The doctor arched an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his bravado. "Very well, then. Mr. West, after reviewing your latest test results, I'm afraid I have some rather unfortunate news." She paused, letting the words hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final blow. "It appears that you are suffering from a severe case of male factor infertility. Your sperm count and motility levels are well below the normal range, making it highly unlikely that you would be able to conceive a child naturally." The room seemed to spin around me as the doctor's words sank in. Jordan, the man who had so callously blamed me for our inability to have children, the man who had sought solace in the arms of another woman in pursuit of his dream family. He was the one with the fertility issue all along. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then Jordan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head in disbelief. "You've got to be kidding me," he spat. "After everything, after all the hell you've put me through, you're trying to pull this stunt?" The doctor's expression hardened. "I assure you, Mr. West, this is no stunt. The test results are conclusive and they speak for themselves." Jordan opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off, unable to contain the fury that was bubbling up inside me. "You know, Jordan, I almost feel sorry for you," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "All this time you've been pointing the finger at me, accusing me of being the reason we couldn't have children. You let your own selfishness and insecurity drive you into the arms of another woman, all because you were too blind to see the truth." His eyes widened as the realization began to sink in, the weight of his own lies and betrayal crashing down upon him. You knew," he stammered, his face pale. "This whole time, you knew." I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. "Of course I knew. Did you really think I was going to let you get away with what you did to me, to us?" The doctor cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the unfolding confrontation. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion another time, when emotions have had a chance to settle." But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. "No, doctor, I think it's time Jordan heard the full truth," I said, turning to face him head-on. "You see, while you were off gallivanting with that little tramp, I was busy collecting evidence. Every sordid detail, every dirty little secret. I have it all." Jordan's face drained of color as the weight of my words sank in. In that moment, he knew he had been beaten at his own game, outmaneuvered and outsmarted by the very woman he had so callously discarded. "And now, thanks to your own carelessness, the whole world knows exactly what kind of man you really are." I continued, relishing in the look of abject horror on his face. A liar, a cheat, a coward who was too weak to face his own shortcomings. Silence hung heavy in the air, punctuated only by the sound of Jordan's ragged breathing. For once in his life, he was utterly speechless, stripped of his bravado and left to confront the harsh reality of his own actions. As we left the doctor's office, Jordan trailing behind me like a wounded animal, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The battle had been long and hard fought, but in the end justice had prevailed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. In the days following the devastating revelation of Jordan's infertility, I found myself riding a wave of vindication and triumph. After months of being gaslit and betrayed, the tables had finally turned, and Jordan was the one left reeling in the aftermath of his own lies and deceit. But my quest for justice was far from over. As word of Jordan's indiscretions spread like wildfire through our small community, I knew I had to strike while the iron was hot. I had already exposed him to our closest friends and colleagues, but there were still those who remained blissfully unaware of the true depths of his betrayal. And so, I hatched a plan, one that would ensure Jordan's humiliation was complete and inescapable. It was a warm summer evening when I invited both of our families over for a casual get-together. Jordan, still reeling from the bombshell I had dropped at the doctor's office, was in no position to protest. One by one, our loved ones trickled in, exchanging pleasantries and sipping on cool drinks as the golden sun dipped below the horizon. Jordan plastered on a forced smile, doing his best to maintain the illusion of normalcy despite the palpable tension in the air. Little did they know, I had already set the stage for the ultimate reveal. As the night wore on and the conversations began to flow more freely, I seized my opportunity. Clearing my throat, I clinked my glass with a fork, commanding the attention of the room. "Friends, family, thank you all for being here tonight," I began, my voice steady and confident. "I know these past few months have been trying for all of us, but I think it's time we address the elephant in the room." Jordan's eyes went wide, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the arms of his chair. He knew what was coming, but he was powerless to stop it. "You see, for a long time I believed that our struggles to conceive were my fault," I continued, my gaze sweeping across the rapt faces of our guests. "Jordan led me to believe that I was the one with the fertility issues, that my body was letting us down." A collective gasp rippled through the room, and I could see the looks of pity and concern etched on their faces. They had no idea what was about to hit them. But the truth is, Jordan was the one who was unable to give me the child I so desperately wanted, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. He was the one who was shooting blanks, so to speak. Jordan let out a strangled sound, his face flushing a deep crimson as the gravity of my words sank in. But I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. And instead of being honest with me, instead of facing the truth like a man, he chose to betray me in the worst possible way. I paused for effect, letting the weight of my next words linger in the air. He cheated on me, with a woman half his age, no less. The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and murmurs, eyes darting between Jordan and me in disbelief. "That's a lie!" Jordan shouted, shooting to his feet in a rage. "She's twisting the truth, manipulating all of you." But it was too late. With a few deft taps on my phone, I had already set my plan in motion. Suddenly, the room was filled with the unmistakable sounds of Jordan's voice, captured in a damning audio recording I had made during one of our many heated arguments. "You're never going to be able to give me what I really want." His voice crackled through the speakers, laced with venom. "A real family, with kids of my own. Maybe it's time we face the facts. This marriage is over." A deafening silence fell over the room as the recording faded out, punctuated only by the sound of Jordan's ragged breathing. "You see, Jordan thought he could have it all," I said, my voice ringing out in the stillness. "He thought he could discard me like yesterday's trash, all in pursuit of his twisted dream of starting a new family with his mistress." I let the words hang in the air, letting them sink in for all to hear. But what he didn't count on was me fighting back. He never expected me to uncover the truth about his own infertility, his own lies and deceptions. Jordan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was utterly defeated, laid bare before the very people he had once tried so hard to impress. As our loved ones filed out one by one, casting disgusted glances in Jordan's direction, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The battle had been hard fought, but in the end, justice had prevailed. And as I watched Jordan slink away, his head hung in shame, I knew that my quest for revenge was finally complete. In the aftermath of my explosive revelation, Jordan's world came crashing down around him. His once promising career was left in tatters, his reputation irreparably tarnished by the sordid details of his infidelity and deception. It didn't take long for the fallout to reach Kaylee, the young mistress who had so brazenly inserted herself into our marriage. As the truth of Jordan's lies and my vengeance came to light, she was quickly cast aside, reduced to a mere footnote in the twisted saga of our unraveling. I'll never forget the look on her face when she realized the depths of Jordan's betrayal, not just towards me, but towards her as well. The tears streamed down her cheeks as she confronted him, demanding answers that he simply couldn't provide. "You told me you were going to leave her," she had sobbed, her voice thick with anger and heartbreak. "You said we were going to have a family together." Jordan, for once, was rendered speechless. The mask of arrogance and bravado he had worn for so long had finally slipped away, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. "Kaylee, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room in desperation. "It's not what you think." But she wasn't having any of it. With a strength I didn't know she possessed, she gathered her things and stormed out, leaving Jordan to wallow in the wreckage of his own making. As for me, I found myself, slowly but surely, picking up the pieces of my shattered life. The road to healing was a long and arduous one, but with each passing day I could feel the weight of Jordan's betrayal lifting from my shoulders. I threw myself into my work, pouring my heart and soul into teaching and connecting with my students in a way I never had before. Their smiling faces, their boundless energy and enthusiasm became a balm for my wounded spirit. And slowly but surely, I began to rebuild my social circles, surrounding myself with people who truly cared for me, friends and family members who had stood by me through the darkest of times. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the pain and anger threatened to consume me once again. But I was determined to emerge from this experience stronger, more resilient, and more grateful for the people and things that truly mattered. As for Jordan, his fall from grace was as spectacular as it was well-deserved. Without the support of his family and friends, and with his professional reputation in tatters, he found himself adrift, grasping at straws in a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of his life. The last time I saw him was at the courthouse, where we had gathered to finalize the terms of our divorce. He looked like a shell of his former self, his once confident demeanor replaced by a haunted, hollow gaze. "Lila," he said, his voice barely above a whisper as he approached me in the hallway. I don't know what to say." I regarded him coolly, my heart hardened by the months of pain and betrayal he had put me through. "Then don't say anything," I replied, my voice firm and unwavering. "You've said more than enough already." He opened his mouth as if to protest, but the words seemed to die on his lips. Instead, he simply nodded, a flicker of resignation passing across his face, and with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing from my life for good. In the months and years that followed, I found myself gradually letting go of the anger and bitterness that had once consumed me. Jordan's transgressions, while painful, no longer held the same power over me. I had emerged from the ashes of our failed marriage like a phoenix, reborn and reinvigorated, ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with open arms. And as I looked towards the future, one thing was certain. I would never again allow myself to be defined by the actions of others, nor would I ever let someone like Jordan take away my sense of self-worth and dignity. I was my own woman, strong and resilient, and nothing, not even the cruelest of betrayals, could ever change that. The day started like any other, with the usual rush to get ready for work and drop my daughter off at school. But as I sat down at my desk, surrounded by fabric samples and design sketches, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, which I almost ignored, thinking it might be another telemarketer. But something urged me to answer. "Is this Jenna?" a hesitant voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "I'm sorry to inform you there's been an accident. Your parents..." The voice trailed off, but I didn't need to hear the rest to know my world had just crumbled. I remember asking for details, my voice sounding so distant, as if someone else was speaking. They were on their way to a quaint little town, a monthly tradition they had. Their car had veered off the road and tumbled down a steep embankment. It was a passerby who called it in, but by then it was too late. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, the phone slipping from my grasp. My mind was a blur, images of my parents flashing before my eyes, their laughter, their love for each other, and their unwavering support for me. It all seemed so distant now. I managed to leave work early, driven by a need to share this unbearable pain with someone who would understand. Derek was the first person who came to mind. My husband, my partner, should have been my solace in such a moment. "Derek, I need you," I said, my voice breaking as I called him. His response was immediate, but not what I expected. "Jenna, what's wrong? I'm in the middle of something." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "It's my parents. They were in an accident. They're gone, Derek, both of them." There was a pause, and for a moment I hoped for words of comfort, a sliver of empathy, but what came was a cold dismissal. "Is that all? Jenna, I'm on a tight schedule here. Can't this wait?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Wait. Derek, my parents are dead. How can you be so heartless?" Another pause, then a sigh. "Look, I'm sorry about your parents, but you know how important this project is. I can't just drop everything. You'll have to handle this on your own." My hands were shaking, tears streaming down my face. "I thought you would care. I thought you would be here for me." "Jenna, we all have our crosses to bear. I'm sure you'll manage. Just don't make this harder than it has to be." The line went dead. The silence that followed was deafening. I was alone, truly alone. The realization hit me hard. The man I had married, the father of my child, was a stranger to me now. I thought back to the days when Derek would have dropped everything to be by my side. Where had that man gone? How had our love turned so cold and distant? But I had no time to dwell on these questions. I had a funeral to plan, relatives to inform, and a daughter to protect from the harsh reality that her grandparents were gone. As I set about these tasks, a resolve began to form within me. Derek's indifference, his blatant disregard for my feelings, had opened my eyes. I couldn't depend on him, not anymore. This tragedy had not only taken my parents, but had also stripped away any illusions I had about my marriage. It was a painful realization, but one that I could not ignore. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew one thing for certain. I had to find the strength to move forward, for my sake and for my daughter's. The days leading up to the funeral were a blur. Between making arrangements and comforting my daughter, Lily, I had little time to process my own grief. Derek's absence was palpable, his indifference a constant weight on my heart. But it was during these moments of solitude that I found unexpected strength. My mother-in-law, Elaine, with whom we shared our home, was of no comfort. Her reaction to the news was as cold as Derek's. "So both gone at once? Must have been quite the shock," she remarked dryly, not even looking up from her magazine. I nodded, barely able to speak. "Yes, it's been hard." Elaine finally glanced at me, her gaze calculating. "Well, at least there's a silver lining with the insurance money, right? We could use a bit of good news around here." I stared at her, incredulous. "Elaine, my parents just died. How can you think about money at a time like this?" She shrugged, her interest already waning. "Money makes the world go round, dear. Best to look on the bright side." The lack of empathy stunned me. I had known Elaine to be difficult, but her callousness in the face of my tragedy was a new low. It was clear I was alone in my grief. The day of the funeral arrived, a somber affair attended by close family and friends. The absence of my husband was noted by many, his excuses of work commitments doing little to mask his apathy. It was a slap in the face, a public display of his disregard for our family. After the service, as I stood by the graveside, my cousin approached me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. "I can't believe Derek didn't show up. How could he be so heartless?" I shook my head, fighting back tears. "He says he's too busy with work." "Too busy for his wife's parents' funeral? That's not just busy, Jenna. That's cruel." Her words echoed my thoughts, amplifying the hurt and betrayal I felt. Derek's actions, or lack thereof, were unforgivable. It was a realization that cut deep, severing what little connection remained between us. In the following days, Derek's indifference became more apparent. Calls went unanswered, and when he did deign to speak to me, his words were empty, devoid of warmth or concern. "It's done then? The funeral and everything?" he asked during one such call, his tone casual, as if inquiring about the weather. "Yes, it's done," I replied, my voice cold. "Good, good. Let's move on then. No point dwelling on it." His words were like a knife to my heart. Move on? How could I move on when every day was a struggle, a painful reminder of the loss I had suffered? It was in that moment that I made a decision. I could no longer stay with a man who saw my parents' death as nothing more than an inconvenience, a man who lacked the basic decency to support his wife in her time of need. The thought of divorce had crossed my mind before, but I had always pushed it aside, afraid of the implications for Lily. But now, staying seemed far worse than leaving. Derek had shown his true colors, and they were darker than I could have ever imagined. As I hung up the phone, a sense of clarity settled over me. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but I was determined to face them head-on. For my sake, for Lily's, and for the memory of my parents, I would start anew. Derek had made his choice, and now I was making mine. In the days that followed my declaration, the atmosphere at home became unbearable. Derek's presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like a looming storm, always on the verge of erupting. It was during one of these tense evenings that I decided to confront him about his affair, armed with undeniable proof and a resolve made of steel. "Derek, we need to talk. Now," I said, my voice steady despite the racing of my heart. He looked up from his phone, annoyance etched on his face. "What is it this time, Jenna?" "It's about us, or rather the end of us. I know about the affair, Derek." For a moment there was silence, the kind that suffocates. Then Derek laughed, a sound so devoid of humor it sent chills down my spine. "Affair? What are you talking about, Jenna? You're delusional." I held up the photographs, the ones that showed him with her, their intimacy undeniable. "Am I? Then explain these." His face paled as he looked at the images, the realization that his secret was out dawning on him. "Where did you get these?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been lying to me, to us, all those late nights, the business trips. It was all her, wasn't it?" Derek stood up, the mask of indifference slipping. "Jenna, listen to me. It's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like? How can you even say that? You've been cheating on me, Derek, on your family. How could you?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration visible in every line of his body. It was a mistake, okay? It meant nothing. It got out of hand. A mistake? Is that supposed to make it all okay? You've destroyed our family over a mistake? Derek moved closer, desperation in his eyes. Jenna, please, we can fix this. I'll end it with her. We can go to counseling, do whatever it takes. Please, don't throw away what we have. What we have. The words echoed in my mind, a cruel reminder of the love that had turned into betrayal. Derek, there's nothing left to save. You threw it all away the moment you decided to be with her. I want a divorce, and I'm taking Lily with me. His demeanor changed then, from pleading to angry. You can't do that, Jenna. I won't let you take my daughter away from me. Your daughter? When was the last time you even spent time with her? No, Derek, I'm going to make sure she's safe and loved, something you obviously can't provide. Derek's anger flared, his voice rising. You think you can just take everything from me? You'll regret this, Jenna. I'll make sure of it. Regret? The only regret I had was not seeing Derek for who he really was sooner. As I walked away from him, from the wreckage of our marriage, I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time, I felt truly free, ready to face whatever came next with my head held high and my daughter by my side. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight for a better future, one where betrayal and indifference had no place. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal preparations and emotional turmoil. Despite Derek's threats and attempts to intimidate me, I pressed forward with the divorce proceedings. It was during one particularly grueling day that I received a call from my lawyer, a call that would shift the balance of power in my favor. Jenna, we've uncovered something that could significantly impact your case, my lawyer began, her voice tinged with a mix of surprise and satisfaction. What is it? I asked, bracing myself for the worst. It's about Derek's financials. It appears he's been funneling money into a separate account, one that's linked to the woman he's been seeing. We can use this to prove financial misconduct. The news hit me like a bolt of lightning. Not only had Derek betrayed our family emotionally, but he had also been draining our resources, jeopardizing our financial security for his affair. Can we take action against this? I asked, my mind racing with the implications. Absolutely. This strengthens your case for both the divorce settlement and custody of Lily. We'll make sure the court sees the full extent of his actions. Armed with this new information, I confronted Derek once again. This time, I had the upper hand, and I was determined to use it to protect myself and Lily. Derek, did you really think you could hide your financial deceit from me? From the courts? I asked, watching as he struggled to maintain his composure. What are you talking about, Jenna? He replied, attempting to feign ignorance. Don't play dumb with me, Derek. I know about the money you've been siphoning off for your affair. It's over. You've lost. The color drained from his face as the realization set in. For the first time I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, fear of losing everything he had taken for granted. You can't prove anything, he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Oh, but I can, and I will. I'm going to make sure you pay for what you've done, not just to me, but to Lily. But I see you've endangered her future for your selfish desires. Derek's demeanor shifted from fear to anger, a dangerous glint appearing in his eyes. You'll regret this, Jenna. I'll make sure you get nothing. But his threats no longer held any power over me. I had the truth on my side, and I was no longer the woman he thought he could control and intimidate. No, Derek, it's you who will regret it. I'm going to expose you for the liar and cheat you are, and when this is over, Lily and I will be free of you and your deceit. As I ended the conversation, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. For too long I had lived in Derek's shadow, subjected to his lies and manipulation, but now the tables had turned. I was ready to fight back, to reclaim my life and secure a safe and happy future for Lily and myself. The battle was far from over, but for the first time I felt confident in my ability to win. The courtroom was charged with tension as Derek and I faced off, surrounded by our respective legal teams. The proceedings had been grueling, but today was different. Today the focus was on Derek's financial deceit and his affair, the evidence laid bare for all to see. Mr. Thompson, can you explain the purpose of the separate account to which you've been funneling funds from the joint account you share with your wife? the judge asked, his tone indicating he'd heard enough excuses. Derek cleared his throat, his usual confidence nowhere to be seen. Your Honor, that account it was for investment purposes. It has nothing to do with the allegations my wife has made. Investment purposes? My lawyer interjected, her voice dripping with skepticism. Is that why there are multiple transactions linking this account to a Miss Rachel Foster, the woman Mr. Thompson has been having an affair with? The courtroom fell silent, the weight of the accusation hanging in the air. Derek's lawyer attempted to intervene, but the judge waved him off, his gaze still fixed on Derek. And Mr. Thompson, how do you respond to the charge of financial misconduct, specifically the misuse of marital funds for the benefit of your affair? Derek's response was a mumbled denial, but it was clear to everyone in the room that his defenses were crumbling. The judge leaned forward, his verdict ready. Given the evidence presented, it's evident that Mr. Thompson has engaged in financial misconduct, jeopardizing not only the marital assets, but also the financial security of his daughter. This will be taken into consideration in the final settlement. As the judge announced the decision, favoring me significantly in both the financial settlement and custody of Lily, Derek's face was a mask of defeat, but it was his whispered words meant only for me that marked his true downfall. You've won, Jenna. Are you happy now? I met his gaze, my response calm and resolute. This was never about winning, Derek. It was about doing what's right for Lily. You brought this on yourself. The courtroom emptied, leaving Derek to grapple with the consequences of his actions. But the victory was bittersweet. While I had secured a future for Lily and myself, the path to get here had been fraught with pain and betrayal. In the days that followed, the fallout from the trial became apparent. Derek's professional reputation suffered greatly, his misconduct in both his personal and financial dealings a public spectacle. Rumors swirled, and soon he found himself ostracized, his career in tatters. As for me, the fight had taken its toll, but I emerged stronger, more determined. With the divorce finalized and Lily's future secured, I could finally begin to rebuild our lives. Derek's downfall was a testament to the consequences of his actions, a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to the surface. The journey had been arduous, filled with challenges and heartache, but as I looked to the future, I knew that Lily and I were on the path to healing. Derek's shadow no longer loomed over us, his presence in our lives reduced to a distant memory. We were free to move forward to create a new life built on love, respect, and honesty, and that was the greatest victory of all. The dust had settled on the courtroom battles, and with Derek's defeat, a new day dawned for Lily and me. Our first morning in our new home was filled with sunlight, casting a warm glow over what was a fresh start. But it wasn't just the location that had changed. It was the air around us, now free of the tension that had once suffocated us. As I unpacked a box in the kitchen, Lily came bouncing in, her laughter a melody that had been missing for too long. "Mom, look, the backyard is huge. Can we get a dog now?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I smiled, the idea taking root. "You know, that's a wonderful idea. We'll need a bit of company in this big place." Her hug was tight, filled with a happiness that radiated from her. "I'm going to name him Buddy." The simplicity of the moment, of planning for a pet, felt like a luxury after the turmoil we'd endured. It was in these small, peaceful instances that I found profound relief and hope for the future. Later that day, I sat down at my new desk, the view from the window overseeing the sprawling backyard where Lily was already imagining adventures with Buddy. It was time to refocus on my career, to rebuild not just our personal lives, but also the professional success I had put on hold. As I drafted emails and planned projects, my phone rang. It was a call from an old colleague, offering congratulations and a proposal for a new, exciting project. The tide had turned, and where there had once been uncertainty, opportunities were now opening up. "Jenna, we've all heard about your strength and determination. It's inspiring, and honestly, we need someone like you to lead this project," my colleague explained, her words sincere. Accepting the offer felt like the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. My career, which had once taken a back seat to marital strife, was now a source of strength and independence. In the evening, as Lily and I sat on our new porch, watching the sunset, I realized that this was what true freedom felt like. We had escaped the shadows and found light in a place we could call our own. "Mom, are you okay? You look a little sad," Lily observed, her young face etched with concern. I pulled her close, my heart full. "I'm more than okay, Lily. I'm happy. We've made it through the storm, and now we're here together, and that's all that matters." Our conversation drifted to plans for the house, for Buddy, and all the adventures we would have. It was a simple, beautiful future we were building, one day at a time. Derek's downfall had been a necessary end, a closure to a chapter that had brought us nothing but pain. But in its wake, we found strength and a bond that only grew stronger. As the night drew in and Lily's laughter filled our new home, I knew that we had not just survived, we had triumphed. Our fresh start was more than a new beginning. It was a testament to resilience, to the power of love over betrayal. And as I looked at Lily, her face alight with joy and excitement for the future, I was reminded of the greatest truth of all. In the end, love always wins.